I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and custodians of the land on which we're meeting. I pay my respects to their elders past and present and the Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here with us today. The Andrews Labor government is strongly committed to treaty, truth, justice and self-determination of Victoria's First Nation peoples. Whether your family has called Victoria home for 5 years or 50,000 years, treaty will bring us closer together and make Victoria a fairer place for everyone, because every vision of the future really should begin with an acknowledgement of the past. So thank you to my friend and colleague. You still are my friend and colleague, even after that opening foray, Martin. I miss you already, I've got to say. I'd like also to thank our hosts, the Victorian Chamber and the Herald Sun, and commend you on your topic of today's forum, Future Victoria, because while the here and now is always pressing, it's crucial that as servants of the public, we act always with the horizon in mind. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge Paul Guerrero, CEO of the Victorian Chamber, for not only today, but for your tireless engagement, some might call it harassment, on behalf of the business community. It's impossible to measure the positive impact that you've had, but I can tell you one thing, that it has been profound. I'd also like to acknowledge former Premier Denis Napthine and the Leader of the Opposition, Matthew Guy, and thank you for joining the conversation today. Now, good governments change lives. They keep their promises, they plan for the future, they deliver what matters. And what this government has always understood is that every day in office is an opportunity to make life better for Victorians, not just for today, but for the many years ahead. So let's fast forward to the future. The year is 2030. They said it couldn't be done. The Bulldogs have just celebrated their 8th straight flag. And the Herald Sun have finally got it right. The rumours were bound to be true eventually, and at the age of 70, I'm contemplating retirement. In 8 years' time, perhaps Victoria's business leaders, including some of you here today, will be at an event much like this ahead of the 2030 state election. Many will travel to the event by train, perhaps at one of the Melbourne Metro's 5 new stations, Arden, the State Library, Parkville, Town Hall or Anzac, which, having opened in 2025, are now part of the city's fabric. Perhaps some will travel on new Velocity trains from Warrnambool, Ballarat or Morwell, travelling on the same fare as their colleagues from South Yarra, Footscray or Hawthorn. And some will be among the first travellers from Melbourne Airport, arriving from Tullamarine to the heart of the city in less than 30 minutes. In 2030, Melbourne is booming. Proudly the nation's cultural capital, we boast a new jewel in our crown, a transformed Melbourne Arts Precinct, the largest cultural infrastructure project undertaken in Australia's history. Tourists and locals alike flock to experience a new NGV contemporary gallery, a revitalised state theatre and 18,000 square metres of new public parkland right in the beating heart of Melbourne. Our city continues to be the place to do business, but differently. While technology enables us to work from anywhere, and sometimes we do, our world-leading precincts reflect the fact that proximity matters, that collaboration matters. Precincts like the Cremorne Tech Hub, Parkville Clayton, Fisherman's Bend and the CBD's Financial Services Cluster are hotbeds for innovation and advancement. Businesses that were just startups back in 2022 have now scaled up, adding to the rich tapestry of commerce across our state. As Australia's tech capital, our AI, quantum computing efforts are improving our industries and our lives and creating jobs. In 2030, our regions are flourishing. They have never been better connected. Through affordable and frequent transport links and high-speed mobile and broadband coverage, the tyranny of distance is consigned to the history books. There is a sense of possibility, indeed of optimism across regional cities and towns in every part of our state. The legacy of the 2026 Commonwealth Games is palpable in the form of fantastic community facilities in Geelong, in Bendigo, Ballarat and Gippsland. Young Victorians and families know that they can live in the areas that they love and still access high-paid jobs, exceptional education and the best quality healthcare. In 2030, Victoria continues to be the education state, but children born now get an even stronger start to life. Our littlest Victorians now have access to universal 3-year-old kinder, and at 4, they now access 30 hours of pre-prep each week. Over 100 government schools that didn't exist just over a decade ago are now up and running, providing our children with access to the very best teachers and the very best facilities. Victoria is home to world-leading TAFEs and universities delivering the very best education and training to young Victorians, older workers and international students alike. Qualified tradesmen and women tell their kids about how they, as big build apprentices, help build the North East Link and the Footscray Hospital, and how they're training their own apprentices as they construct the suburban rail loop, the biggest transport project in Victoria's history, one that will create thousands of jobs, slash travel times and amplify the economic potential of our suburbs. In 2030, our health system is leading the world. New cancer treatments developed right here in Victoria are saving lives, lives that would otherwise be lost without Victoria's world-class mRNA manufacturing ecosystem driven by our renowned scientists. The mental health system has been completely rebuilt from the ground up. Victorians can access care services wherever they are with the support of thousands of more mental health workers. New hospitals have risen from the ground in Melton, West Gippsland and Albury-Wodonga. In Parkville, at the new Royal Women's Hospital, a woman gives birth to a baby who would have been a dream unfulfilled without Australia's first 3 public fertility service. She's brought into the world by a midwife who decided to pursue her own dreams when she learned the government could cover her course fees to make nursing free. In 2030, Victoria will be a clean energy powerhouse. A government-owned 100% renewable power company has changed the dynamic of the energy market, driving down energy prices for Victorian households and businesses and creating thousands of jobs across the state. In 2030, Victoria has now proudly cut its emissions by 50%, well on its way to net zero by 2045. And in 2030, our economy continues to drive the nation. Victorian GSP continues to grow thanks to the entrepreneurship and the grit of our mighty business sector. There are more women in the workforce, in high-paying jobs and on boards, enhancing our economic output and lifting productivity. 50 new government-owned childcare centres have increased the availability and lowered the cost of care, meaning it's easier for parents and particularly women to return to work when they want to and on their terms. Our highly skilled workers support their employers to do things better and faster. Business is booming, confidence is strong, and Victorians have access to the jobs and the high quality of life that they deserve. Now, the 2030 vision I just shared is not a pipe dream. The foundations have been laid before us all to see. It reflects a future that the Andrews government is already working with industry and the community to deliver. Our future is bright because our businesses are strong. Our future is bright because our community is strong. And it's bright because when in 2020 the outlook was dire, with international borders closing and the world on its knees, the Andrews Labor government used its healthy balance sheet to support the community. We were focused on the well-being of Victorians rather than short-term balance sheet challenges, investing more than $44 billion to defend Victorian lives, jobs and businesses. They were our priority. The 2030 I describe can become a reality because We've already invested in the infrastructure that Victorians want and indeed deserve, with our $90 billion big build, including 165 major rail and road projects in every corner of our state, supporting 190,000 jobs. The future is made possible because we backed Victorian startups, innovation and entrepreneurship and businesses through access to capital programs like the $2 billion Breakthrough Victoria Fund. The future is made possible because we turbocharged better mobile and broadband coverage through the $550 million Connecting Victoria program, unlocking opportunities to our regions and suburbs. We simply could not wait for the Morrison government. This future is made possible because we put our younger generation first by investing more than $12.8 billion in schools. It's made possible because we prioritise Victoria's health, committing to all the recommendations of the Mental Health Royal Commission and investing a record $158 billion in our healthcare system and its workforce since coming to office. It's made possible because we embedded our early intervention principles in our budgeting to target investments to program the vulnerable groups in our community, the things that they needed most to improve their lives and job outcomes and to reduce pressure on acute services. And it's made possible because we cut or abolished taxes and fees on 57 separate occasions, saving businesses $2.5 billion over a 4-year period, providing over $13 billion in direct business support when times were tough. And we provided $1 billion per year in first home buyer support. And the future that I describe is made possible because we didn't just promise, we deliver. We don't cut, we build. 67 dangerous and congested level crossings are gone. And if re-elected, we'll drive the tally up to 110 level crossing removals by 2030. More than 200,000 solar systems installed, carbon emissions down almost 30%. And if re-elected, we've committed to delivering 4.5 gigawatts of power, the equivalent of replacing Loy Yang A entirely with renewables. Almost 600,000 jobs created since November 2014. That means 1 in 6 jobs in the Victorian economy did not exist when we came to office. Historically low unemployment levels, the fastest growing economy in the nation, and if re-elected, we will not break the stride of our economic recovery. And although this speech is fundamentally about the future, it is of course important to consider the past. Because when it comes to governing, past behaviour is the best indicator of future performance. And on the 26th of November, Victorians will have a critical choice to make. I encourage Victorians to look at the alternatives before them, look at the facts, consider the values that underpin them. When the Conservative side of politics were last in power, they cut school infrastructure spending to a mere $200 million per year. The Andrews government has invested $1.6 billion per year, because what could be more important for the future than the next generation? Just last election, the opposition promised to scrap Victoria's renewable energy target. Under the opposition, the Victorian unemployment rate was 6.7%. Today, it's 3.5%, and at 2.9%, regional unemployment is the lowest in the country. And despite a newfound interest in health, records show when last in office, they cut $1 billion from the system. They closed hospitals and they went to war with our health workforce. If Victorians had made a different choice in 2014 and 2018, how far behind would we be? And how different would the 2030 that I've just described to you be? In wrapping up, I want to acknowledge that the challenges that we're all facing. The headwinds of high inflation and interest rates will test us all. These headwinds are testing businesses and they're testing households. But while the Alternative government has already come clean on some of the projects and jobs that they'll cut, we know, just like the best businesses, you must invest to grow. It's these very investments that will enable us to return to surplus by growing the economy, just as a budget update released last week confirms that we will. It's much easier to be a small target, to operate within your boundaries. Thinking and delivering big is hard, and dividends are not always immediate or indeed obvious. Like John F. Kennedy told Rice University back in 1962, it's not surprising that some would have us stay where we are a little longer, to rest, to wait. But just like JFK told his audience, we do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard and because the future demands it. Believe it or not, I have a reputation of being a pessimist. But even a pessimist sometimes can't help being swayed by the facts. The outlook for Victoria is strong. Victorians are strong. We are resilient. We're positive, we're progressive, and I've marvelled at the response of the Victorian people during the pandemic. Overwhelmingly, as a society, we stuck together. We cared for each other, and as a community, we'll continue to move ahead together. From the outset, we planned and we built for the future and for all Victorians. Looking back, there's a lot to be proud of. Looking forward, 2030 will be brilliant, regardless of whether or not the Bulldogs even make the 8. Thank you very much.